Hi, y'all. So today we are going to be going over some new immigration news, specifically talking about the new family reunification parole for Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. So I will be telling you how to qualify and what you need to do to make sure you do not miss your chance at this parole. I will also be talking to you about the difference between the August and September visa bulletin because there is a big change for children and spouses of permanent residents. Okay, so it is a good one. So stick around. You really want to know this. And as always, I am Lillian Chukura. I'm a U.S. immigration attorney, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So let's jump right in. Hi, Mr. Tusk. Thank you for joining me. If you are joining me live, please don't forget to say hi and ask me your questions in the comments, okay? If you're watching this on the replay and one of the things I talk about resonates with you and you have a question about it, please go ahead and put it in the comments. I do go back and respond to you, okay? So, the first thing I want to talk about today is the new family reunification parole for nationals of Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. So, first, I'm going to go over how do you even qualify for this parole and what does family reunification mean? So basically, the family reunification paroles are specifically for the families that have already applied for an I-130, right? You are, let's say you're a US citizen, you apply for an I-130 for your spouse who is from Colombia. And they are currently in Colombia waiting for an interview. The I-130 is approved and they're just waiting for an interview and it's taking forever. This parole program is for you. Okay. So it is specifically, again, for people that already have an I-130 approved and the beneficiary, not the petitioner, the beneficiary of the I-130 has to be from Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, or Honduras. Okay. The petitioner can be from anywhere in the world. But the beneficiary, the person that's actually going to get the visa to come to the US, must be from one of these four countries. All right. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the only way to apply for this is by invitation. So this is the not so great part, right? Even though this new parole program is now active, right? The National Visa Center is the one that will actually send you an invitation to then apply for the parole. So you cannot just go and file for this parole without an invitation. Okay, it will be denied if you do not have an invitation to apply. So that's number one. Okay, just because this parole exists does not mean you can just go and apply for it. You must be invited to apply. Your invitations, so invitations to apply started going out July 31st, 2023, right? July 31st, 2023, the National Visa Center, NVC, started sending out these invitations. So, how can you make sure you don't miss an invitation? Update your address, okay? Excuse me. So, when you filed your I-130, so the petitioner, right, the U.S. citizen or permanent resident that's filing for a family member, when you filed your I-130, if you included an email address that is valid, the NVC will send you an email. If they do not have an email for you, then they will mail it to the address they have on file. So since your I-130 was approved, you have moved, you need to update NVC of your new address. Okay. If since the time your I-130 was approved, you moved, you the petitioner, you the US citizen or permanent resident filing for a family member moved, you need to update your address with National Visa Center, not USCIS. Okay. Do not do a change of address with USCIS. You need to do a change of address with the National Visa Center. How do you do this? You go under the NVC inquiry form. Okay. The NVC inquiry form will let you put in all your information, the beneficiary's information, and then you can on the box where you can put like the reason, you can say, I want to update my address. My former address is blah, blah, blah. My new address is blah, blah, blah. That way, the National Visa Center has a current address for you. All right. If you haven't moved, then you don't have to do anything. All right. If they want to invite you to actually apply for this parole, again, they will email the email address they have on file for the petitioner, or they will mail the letter to you with the invitation. Okay. You cannot file this parole without an invitation. So you have to wait for the invitation before you can file. All right. They have started sending these out. Right. They said July 31st, and I can confirm they have already started sending these invitations out. People are receiving it, and people are going ahead and filing for the parole. How do you file for the parole? You file an I-134A. Okay, so I have a whole video on the I-134A. It's a different parole program. However, it's the same exact form. So you can go ahead and fill that out once you get the invitation, basically saying that you are willing to sponsor the person. Again, if you are the petitioner of the I-130, you are willing to sponsor the person. So now you can do it this way. Why does this matter? Right? In some countries, you are waiting outside the US for an interview for years. In some visa categories, you are waiting for years for a visa to become available. With this parole program, the person you're filing for can come into the US, live and work in the US while they wait for the visa to become available, while they wait for their green card application to be approved. So let's say you're filing for your spouse and it's taking forever. You apply for the parole is approved. They come into the US, they can then apply for adjustment of status in the US and get their green card in the US. Let's say you're filing for your child that's over 21. We know right now it's taking about 7-8 years for any movement to happen in those cases. Well, if they get this parole and come into the US, they can stay in the US until there's a visa available, and then they can apply for a green card in the US without having to leave again. Okay, so that's why this parole program is so good and so beneficial to people. So again, you don't have to leave the US to apply for the to get your green card. Once you have the parole, you can stay here until there's a visa available, until you can apply for adjustment of status. Okay, so that is the parole program. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. But the main thing to keep in mind is it's by invitation only, and the NVC, the National Visa Center, will send you either an email or mail you a letter to the last address they have on file for you. So if the last address they have on file for you is no longer your current address, you need to go on the National Visa Center website and do a MVC inquiry form, and that way you can update them of your new address. Okay, so that is the biggest thing that I wanted to get out of the way, because it is so great and so important that people know about it and that you are aware of how you will be notified about it. The next thing I want to cover is the no interviews for green cards, right? USCIS is still still waiving interviews. And not just for parents or minor children. They're waiving interviews for marriage-based cases, for removal of conditions. Okay, so if you're filing based on any of those, stack your application with a lot of evidence of your relationship so that you can get your marriage-based case waived. You can get the interview waived, okay? The only people that are not getting their interviews waived are people with criminal records. I can tell you that, right? If you have a criminal record, if you have a negative immigration history, you're not getting your interview waived. You will have an interview in those situations. However, if you do not have a criminal record, if you do not have any negative immigration history, stack your evidence, okay? Make sure you have a lot of evidence of your relationship so that if USCIS asks for more documentation of your relationship, you're sending those in. Something else you can do to help speed up the process and not require any delays is sending in your medical exam report with your application. So if you're filing your green card application today and you want to have your interview waived, I would suggest including, actually, I'm suggesting, USCIS is also suggesting that you include your medical exam report, because guess what? When your file gets in front of the officer that's going to make the final decision on your green card and they decide to waive your interview, if there's no medical exam report on file, now they have to send you a request for evidence for the medical exam report, and then they have to put your file to the side until they get that. And then when they get it, they still have to, it has to make its way to the officer, and then the officer has to review it. It's a whole thing, right? So those are delays that you don't want. So when you're filing your green card application, make sure you're including that medical exam report so that when the officer decides to waive your interview, they can actually just go ahead and approve your case without asking you for any additional documentation. Okay. So, medical exam report, put that in there and make sure that you are including as much evidence of your relationship as possible. Now, there's a new thing where the service centers are sending out the request for the medical exams. Remember, before I told you that when you get that request for evidence for the medical exam, it's a good indication that your case is, your interview is going to be waived, right? That was before, right? Before it was that when you get that notice, it means that the officer has your file and there's a really good chance that your interview will be waived. Well, now there's a little extra step that you need to take to figure out if that's the case for you. Okay. So the National Benefit Center has started sending out these requests for evidence for the medical. So the service center will look through your file and see that there's no medical. They will send you a request for the medical, just to help speed things up once it gets in front of the officer. This does not mean that it's in front of the officer and that your interview will most likely be waived. The only way to know for sure whether your interview will be waived now is to look at when you get your request for evidence, look at the top right corner. Does it say a PO box as the return address, or does it have your local field office? Right. So in Massachusetts, we have two field offices. We have one in Lawrence and one in Boston. So if you're looking at your notice, does it say PO box, blah, blah, blah? Or does it say, 2 Mill Street, Lawrence, Massachusetts? If it says 2 Mill Street, Lawrence, Massachusetts, that means your file was in front of an officer. The officer looked through everything and only requested the medical. That's a great indication that they want to waive your interview. However, if it says some PO box, whatever, that means it's still at the service center and hasn't reached the officer that's going to make the final decision. But that also means that when it does get in front of the officer, basically the National Visa Center is trying to basically skip a step. And once it gets to the officer can make that final decision. So again, if you're filing a brand new application, make sure that you are including your medical exam report so that you give yourself the fastest chance of getting your interview waived. Make sure that you are including as much evidence of your relationship, especially in marriage-based cases, to get your interview waived. Like I said, in most parents, U.S. citizens filing for their parents or U.S. citizens filing for their minor children, there's typically not an interview for those, again, except when there's, negative immigration histories or where there is a criminal record. Okay? So the next thing that I want to share with you is, of course, the visa bulletin. Okay, we need to talk about this because there is a change that's coming up that's going to affect some people, and let's talk about it. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see what I'm seeing. Perfect. All right. So basically, on the left-hand side, you see that it is August 2023. And then on this side, we have September 2023. I just wanted to give you like a quick comparison so that you can see both of them and see exactly why it's important. Okay. You can basically see what the visa bulletin is looking like, why I wanted to flag this for you. So the State Department issues a visa bulletin every single month. Okay, every single month they're issuing a visa bulletin. It basically tells us where they are as far as the visa they're processing, right? Which ones are they processing? And this is going to be based on your priority date. For most people, their priority date is the date that they actually filed their application. So the date that USCIS received their I-130, for example. Okay, so that is typically your priority date. And then from there, you are going to want to scroll down and just figure out where you fit as far as, the categories, right? So F1 is unmarried sons and daughters of US citizens. So that means they're over 21, right? Because they're not immediate relatives, they get a preference category. So they're F1, they're unmarried, and they're over 21. F2A is spouses and children of permanent residents. Okay, again, this is minor children. All right, children that are under 21 of permanent residents is F2A. So they're spouses and children that are under 21 and unmarried. Because remember, once you're married, you're no longer considered a child for immigration purposes even if you're under 21. Okay, you're not considered a child. You'll be put into the over 21 or married category. Okay, so F2B is for unmarried children of permanent residents that are over 21. Then married sons and daughters of US citizens and brothers and sisters of US citizens. So let's look at the categories, right? Let's look at the dates because that's what you want to know. Let's look at the dates. So the final action date is the date that tells the embassy if they can actually approve your case yet, right? So if the final action date, for example, for F2A, so the permanent residents, the spouse and children under 21 and the unmarried of permanent residents remember, this is August on this side, and this side is September. So for August, that F2A is at October 2017. But in September, it actually moved. It moved up to January 2018. So anyone that filed their applications before this date, so in September, everyone that filed their application before this date can actually be issued a visa. Okay, so the final action date is whether the person can actually be issued a visa. Now, the next thing is the filing date. So the filing date is when can you start doing your DS-260, uploading your affidavit of support, all those things, to then get in line for an interview over here on the final action date, right? So this is where there has been some moves for the F2As. So in August, this is current. This means you can immediately, your I-130 is approved and sent to the National Visa Center. Immediately, you can start uploading your documents, start doing your DS-260, submitting everything to the National Visa Center to become documentarily qualified for an interview. However, starting in September, now there's a date. It's no longer current. That means if your I-130 is approved and your date is, your priority date is before September 1st, 2023, then you're able to go ahead and upload your documents and do your DS-260. If it's after September 1st, 2023, then you can't. So basically, for anyone filing a new I-130, you really need to keep an eye on this. Hopefully, it does go back to being current. It's been current for many, many months, and that was great for permanent residents, because it basically meant you are almost on the same track as children and spouses of U.S. citizens. But now there is a date there. So that is going to delay the process for people that are going through this I-130 consular processing, having to figure out, when can I actually get my family here? This is going to be what you're looking at, okay? So basically, if you file by September 1st, just know once the I-130 is approved, as of now, once your I-130 is approved, you're able to do that. But if you're filing after September 1st, 2023, when your I-130 is approved and nothing, let's say nothing changes with this visa bulletin and it stays the same, if your I-130 is approved, you're stuck until this changes. So that's why I wanted to really take the time and talk to you about this, because I wanted to show you exactly why this matters, why you paying attention to the visa bulletin matters, because changes like this do happen, and sometimes it even gets rolled back a lot. So this is only rolled back to September 1st, 2023. But in some other categories, it can even go back to like 2022 if they feel like they don't have enough visas for the people that are already waiting. They can roll it back even further. So it's so important that you pay attention to the date and your priority date. Okay, you must know your priority date. So your priority date will always be on your I-130 approval notice, okay? So just know that if you're ever confused about where your priority date is, look at your I-130 approval notice, and it will say priority date and give you an exact date. And then you can use that to figure out where you fit in on the visa bulletin, okay? One more thing I wanted to cover with this is for people that ask me all the time, I want to file for my siblings. How long is it taking? They're working on March 2008. Okay, March 2008. We are in 2023. So it's going to take some time. All right. For married children of US citizens, they're on March 2010. So that's about 13 years. If it stays current, right? If they stay consistent with the date, you are looking at more 13 years. However, for brothers and sisters of US citizens, it's going to be more like, 15, 16 years. So pay attention to that. That is why this matters so much, is that you really want to pay attention to the visa bulletin so that you know when to, start putting together your applications, putting together your affidavit of support, uploading documents, putting together your DS-260, getting your police reports ready. Like, it's so important to pay attention to this because you need to know when it's time to go. All right. Because once it's time to go and it's time to start uploading those documents, you want to do it immediately. Okay. The sooner you are able to upload everything that the National Visa Center wants for you to be eligible for an interview, the better. Okay. If you delay on giving them the documents, then you're not in line for an interview, right? Just because you can upload documents does not mean you're in line for an interview until you have uploaded every single piece of document and they tell you, all right, we have everything we need. You're not in line for an interview. So pay attention to this. Know how to get to the visa bulletin. You can literally just search visa bulletin and it will take you to the website. Okay. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. Even if you are watching this on the replay, I am more than happy to respond to your questions. And also, if you want a full visa bulletin breakdown, please let me know. I'm always willing to do a video on just the visa bulletin because it can get confusing. So just put it in the comments that you want the visa bulletin videos, and I will make sure to do those on a monthly basis just so you can stay updated. Like I said, it's so important, especially if you are not an immediate relative of a US citizen. You need to know the visa bulletin, you need to know how it works, and you need to know when it's time to go and start uploading your documents. Okay. Now, just wanted to recap the parole program for Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. You must get an invitation from the National Visa Center. Please, 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 if you moved since your I-130 was approved, all right, if you have moved since your I-130 was approved, go to the MVC inquiry form and update your address, okay? So you put all your information on the bottom. It will ask you what you need, and you can put it in that box that you want to update your address from, X to Y. All right. And that way they will at least have a current address for you. And you can also ask them to update your email address so they also have a current email address for you. All right. Because again, they will either email you or send you a mail to the last address they have on file for you. Okay. And once you get that, you basically want to get started putting in that parole application. If you think you may qualify, you may want to start thinking about, putting together a little, thing of all the documents you will probably need so that when you do get that email, you can go straight ahead and start filing the I-134A. Okay. So again, have questions, put them in the comments. If you found this video helpful, please go ahead and hit the like button. If you haven't done so already, subscribe so that you do not miss any of my uploads. And as always, thank you so much for joining me. If you would like a private consultation with me where we go over your case and figure out what you qualify for, you can do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. Thank you and have a great one. Thanks for joining me.